Political panel, and as ever we've got a really good lineup. We're always very grateful to our MPs and our journalist friend for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. There's so much going on at the moment. It is really, really good to get the view of some of our elected representatives. So let me introduce them to you. Welcome to the show, Tony Vaughan. He's the Labour MP for Folkestone and Hythe, and he's a member of the Justice Committee. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
Welcome, and welcome to the show, James Wild, who's the Conservative MP for North West Norfolk. Hello, James.
Good afternoon.
Welcome. And welcome to Seamus Logan, who's the SNP MP for Aberdeenshire North and Moray East. Now, have I pronounced that properly, Seamus?
You have. Good afternoon, Aisha.
Good afternoon. It's lovely because last time I said Moray East, and the wrath that was unleashed was pretty wild.
Not from me.
No, not from you. Not from you, to be fair, not from you. And welcome, my good friend Noah Hoffman, political correspondent for The Sun. And we shared a sofa at Newsnight on Friday night, Noah, didn't we?
We did. It was no better way to spend a Friday.
We know how to party on a Friday night, don't we, Noah? We really know. We really, really do. Right, look, we've got lots to get through. We are obviously going to be spending a significant amount of this time talking about what's happening in the Middle East. We're going to start with the conflict in the Middle East. We're then going to move on to some of the economic consequences here in the UK. We're also hoping to talk about immigration plans as well. And you at home are very important to this discussion as well. Do get involved if you've got questions, observations, if you want to challenge one of our panellists or you want to cheer what they've said or applaud what they've said, let me know. You can text 87222, start your message with the word Times. You can tweet us at Times Radio, and you can WhatsApp us 0333 003 2353. Well, let's start with Iran. It does not sound like things are calming down anytime soon after President Trump threatened to obliterate Iranian power plants if the Strait of Hormuz is not opened within 48 hours. However, Iran does not sound like it's backing down. Iran says it will hit other Gulf energy sites in response. Well, let's listen to what Steve Reid said this morning, particularly in relation to Iranian missiles potentially hitting London.
There's no assessment that I'm aware of that says either that the Iranians would target Europe or even that they could, if they wanted to. We've got one of the finest militaries in the world. We're perfectly capable, if there were anything like that, we're perfectly capable of defending ourselves as we have done for decades. The UK is not going to be dragged into this war. We will take necessary collective defensive action to protect British nationals and British assets in the region. And we've all seen how recklessly the Iranians have been responding.
James, I'm going to start with you. How worried should we be about the prospect of London being hit by missiles from Iran?
Well, for 3 years, I was the special advisor to the then Defence Secretary, so I'm acutely aware of the risk that we face from these kind of attacks. I think what we need to have is a bit of clarity from the government. I accept that Steve Reid, as the Housing Secretary, perhaps doesn't have access to some of the information, but we learnt about this attack on Diego Garcia from the media, not from the Prime Minister making any kind of comment. And we need to know what the UK assessment is and what their judgment is. We need to deal in facts rather than speculation. So I think what we need is a bit more transparency and clarity from the government rather than these things coming through open source reports on Twitter. And Steve Reid seemed to indicate that the UK had taken down this missile, but that's obviously not the case.
James, do you expect an urgent question, or do you expect government ministers to come to the House to update parliamentarians on this tomorrow?
Well, I expect in this kind of situation, the Defence Secretary should be making statements to Parliament, not with respect to Times Radio, not to the media in the first
How dare you?
I know, that's brave of me. To come and give the facts as they understand them. I've been in the Ministry of Defence. They have access to all sorts of classified as well as open source intelligence. So we'll know well what the situation is now. And they need to level with the British people and about what the risks are and what action they're taking to defend UK bases in the region and the UK more widely.
Tony, how worried are you and do you expect the Defence Secretary, John Healey, to come to Parliament tomorrow and update people? Because there will be people worried about these reports.
Yeah, this is, of course, a really worrying attack, and we do need to understand the facts, and we do need to understand the government's assessment, as James said. I mean, I think one of the things that Steve Reed talked about was not revealing operational details, and I think while there's an obvious need for us to understand the facts, it's obvious that the government isn't going to be able to give away everything. But of course, that these are entirely legitimate questions, and I'd be very surprised if ministers were not before the House next week to set out the position and enable proper scrutiny to be applied.
And do you feel, Tony? I mean, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, was at pains to say yesterday, look, we are only involved in defensive operations, not offensive operations. But does that not feel quite semantical? I mean, to most people, most members of the public, feels like we are kind of involved in this now.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's a crucial distinction for the purposes of whether of the kind of legal basis for us being involved, that it's on a defensive basis rather than an offensive basis, and it's really important because we don't want to be essentially adding fuel to the fire. We want to be de-escalating. We want to be protecting UK citizens in the region, our bases in Bahrain and Cyprus and our allies, and that is a very, very important principle. But I mean, I think the government's been absolutely right about the way that we have distinguished very clearly between offensive and defensive, because it goes to the legality, as the Prime Minister has said in the Commons many times, that we can't commit British troops on the basis on an unclear legal basis. And although there had at the time been a lot of deriding of that position by other parties, I think that's turned out to be exactly the right position. And as this war gets more intensive and more damage is done and more threats arise, I think that distinction will prove itself to have been absolutely the right position.
And Seamus, do you think that distinction is well drawn by the Prime Minister?
No, not at all. I'd love to know how three B-1 bombers sitting at the end of a runway, one could be offensive, one could be defensive. How on earth are we to distinguish between the legalities here at all? I agree with James. We need facts here, not speculation about this latest attack or alleged attack on Diego Garcia. And until we have those facts, there's going to be a lot of speculation. Your original question, Aisha, I'm much more concerned, I think the UK government probably is as well, about the threat of a terrorist attack rather than a missile attack. I think that's where the focus should be.
So you don't quite buy this missile threat?
No, it's not that I don't buy it. We don't have the facts. And until we do have the facts, all we're doing is speculating. And I think you said it yourself a minute ago, Aisha, we are involved, whether we like it or not. And because we're involved, we could well be targets for some hothead to launch a terrorist attack against our people.
I mean, Noah, that's the sort of difficulty. I mean, the Prime Minister and, of course, the Attorney General, Richard Herman, I think Richard Herman is doing some speech this week. They're being very, very clear about the legal definitions. But to a lot of people listening, it will feel it's a bit like saying, oh, we're present but not involved. Lots of people will think we kind of feel like we are involved.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, I know that a lot of MPs on this panel are very connected with the concept of international law, but frankly, the past few years have proven really that it's just a completely broken system. And I don't think, considering that when all the real world powers literally couldn't give two hoots about international law is the priority, I think it really comes down to considering what's in the British national interest, what's in the interest of protecting, citizens, but also considering the cost of living implications, and make decisions on how and when certain moves within this war are played based on British interests rather than international law per se. And I think as well, a lot of the public, that's what they'll be thinking as well. They will want Starmer to make decisions based on how it is going to impact them, both on a safety level, but also on a cost of living plane as well.
And to Seamus's point, which I think is a point well made, but it's a chilling one, which is, I mean, there is obviously we've got to look at, what Iran is capable of doing. And, some people have been messaging in saying that most of Europe has a missile defence and Patriot missiles and other systems. But Seamus also makes the point about terrorist attacks. And I think that's something which, of course, the government won't want to sort of talk about that. But that there'll be a lot of work going on behind the scenes, Noah, won't there, in terms of the intelligence services and security services right now in this country?
Yeah, absolutely. And every so often, as reporters, we get given some new stats on how many attacks were foiled by our security services, who do appear to be doing a very good job, actually. There was a brilliant covert operation to target 2 men in Manchester who were planning a mass shooting on a Jewish march. We've seen 2 Iranians arrested on suspicion for spying. So behind the scenes, a lot is happening. But I want to go back to the point that a lot of the MPs were making, which is that as much transparency as safely possible must be conveyed to the public, because you don't want to have people speculating. You don't want to have people, really struggling to sleep and to sort of make decisions about how they view the conflict and how they view the politics of it without as much information as possible. And so that's what I would urge, is just maximum transparency, while, also keeping the country safe and not revealing anything that could compromise national security.
Yeah, of course, not giving away operational details. Thanks for your messages coming in. Simon says most of Europe has missile defence and Patriot missiles and other systems. We don't. Someone else says we're not capable of defending ourselves, as the only ship able to shoot down a missile is a Type 45 and we only have one. And it's in the Med right now. We don't have any missile defence in the UK right now. And Alf from Halifax, hello, Alf says, I think Trump is wanting to draw others into this war. He knows if he's successful, the countries which will need to restock weapons used. And this means revenue for the US as the principal supplier of arms. At the moment, the costs are largely America's. And we heard from Robin Nibbler earlier that the Pentagon has come and asked for a big amount of money from Congress to keep funding this war. So there is obviously a big cost, as you say, to the American coffers as well. Well, look, coming up next, we are going to be moving on to how the government should respond to the economic consequences of this war and a looming energy crisis. Do get in touch. You can text 87222, start your message with the word Times. You can tweet us at Times Radio, and you can WhatsApp us 0333 003 2353. Should the government do another bailout if energy bills start really rocketing again? Or do you agree with Jeremy Hunt, who spoke to Times Radio earlier today, and he said, don't do that again. It's just caused so many problems. Let me know what you think. It's just gone 5:17. You're listening to Aisha Hazarika on Times Radio with the Sunday Times Best Places to Live 2026, sponsored by Lloyds.
Daryl Morris on Times Radio.
Join me, Daryl Morris, for all the day's news, an exclusive first look at tomorrow's front pages.
Obviously, this has really big political ramifications.
A journey into the stories shaping our times.
I think that what happened yesterday was a disaster.
I know I broke the law. Why would I want a pardon?
And the people at the heart of them.
They should have more working class northerners. And I wonder if maybe you might be getting a phone call, Daryl.
Daryl Morris, tonight from 10 on Times Radio.
I thought that I'd seen beauty. Then I sailed where icebergs gleam. I thought I'd witnessed nature, but this surpassed my dream. I thought that I'd known wonder, then sailed beneath these skies. I thought I'd seen the world until I opened my eyes. Change the way you see the world with HX Expeditions. Search Travel HX to discover more.
Download the free Times Radio app and listen to us wherever you are.
Aisha Hazarika on Times Radio with Lloyds, helping first-time buyers open the door to a place of their own.
Welcome back, and just a reminder to listen to the Times at 1. It is excellent. It brings you the latest news and sharpest analysis Monday to Thursday, and we have some great names in current affairs. We've got Andrew Neil, Danny Finkelstein, Stephen Sacker, Trevor Phillips, and this week the great Jo Coburn. She's here at 1 o'clock every day, Monday to Thursday, and I'm on air Friday at 1 o'clock. Right, let me reintroduce our Sunday political panel. We've got a great lineup today. We've got Tony Vaughan representing the Labour Party, James Wild, the Conservative, Seamus Logan, the SNP, and Noah Huffman from The Sun. Let's now turn our attention to this looming economic crisis, and politicians across the country are really understandably worried about this. Tomorrow, Keir Starmer is going to hold an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss the economic consequences, and Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, is also expected to attend this COBRA meeting. He spoke towards the end of last week and said, look, things are going to get really, really tough. Of course, the Bank of England held interest rates. It was hoped that there would be a couple of cuts. That doesn't look like it's happening now. He kind of warned that if inflation goes up, then interest rates may have to go up as well. And UK energy bills are expected to rise by more than £300 this summer, according to the forecast of Cornwall Insight. Tony, it's a really difficult situation for the government, and particularly Rachel Reeves. You know, she was hoping that the economy was turning a bit of a corner. She was really hoping that interest rates were going to be coming down, that inflation was starting to get under control. I mean, this is going to be very, very serious. A lot of people will really struggle. I mean, the weather is going to get warmer, but particularly if this conflict goes on and we get into the autumn and winter, what do you think this Labour government should do? I mean, there's already been calls saying, look, should Rachel Reeves look at kind of changing the fiscal rules and, if necessary, borrow more money to help struggling families out? What are your thoughts?
Well, you're right. This is massively frustrating. I mean, the government was feeling that we were turning a corner and getting into a really good place. But unfortunately, what's happening in the Middle East is changing what we had expected. I mean, the government has moved quite quickly to immediately address the question of heating oil, though. I mean, in my constituency, it's semi-rural, that you've got a lot of people who are still, they're not properly on the kind of mains gas, or you know, don't have the mechanism to generate their electricity or heat. And so the government put in £53 million for that very, very quickly. And there's going to be, for April, £150 off energy bills, and a whole load of other things like the Warmer Homes discounts and winter fuel payment, cold weather payment, etc. But of course, with prices going up for gas and for petrol, etc., people are going to be feeling it more than they should have been. And of course, the government's going to have to think really carefully and is continually thinking about this.
Do you think that they may have to sort of actually intervene and help people with bills and do some kind of bailout?
Some sort of support is going to be needed. I mean, I prefer to see targeted support for people who are really struggling with energy bills, because we don't want to see a situation where we return to people deciding whether they're going to heat their homes or eat a meal. I mean, we cannot get back to that situation.
But can we afford it, Tony, in terms of, you know, the cost of government borrowing is about to go up. We haven't got enough money to spend on defence. Can the government afford it?
Well, this is the big question. But I think for those who are experiencing the biggest increase in their energy bills relative to their income, I think the government will need to provide some sort of targeted support. And of course, that is the big question.
And just final question to you, Tony. If that meant breaking the fiscal rules or changing the fiscal rules, would you support Rachel Reeves?
Well, I think we've got to see what Rachel Reeves says about this, because it's a very, very complex situation, and also an evolving one where the flaws, the sands are shifting all the time. And so it is very, very difficult to answer that.
OK. James, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, Jeremy Hunt was out this morning saying that when he looks back, it was a mistake to have done such a big, generous sort of intervention to help people with energy bills back in the day, and actually it's stored up a lot of trouble. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the danger and the risk we've got at the moment is governments are meant to be able to deal with such external shocks, but what we've seen is taxes pushed up by £66 billion over the last two budgets. Borrowing yields are now far higher than they were under Liz Truss, and the chances of room for manoeuvre is limited. We borrowed more in February, I think, in any month since COVID. So she's not in a position to do something without massively increasing the borrowing, which comes at a cost. I think under the last Conservative government during COVID and afterwards with the energy price issues, we did put in place generous support to help people. But what we need to do actually is to lift the green levies off energy bills.
But just to interrupt there, James, when you look back on that, do you think it was a mistake to do that in retrospect?
Well, I think it was an unprecedented time, and it was right to support people, but we need to learn from interventions that we made in the same way as we did through COVID. And obviously we had the furlough scheme that cost a huge amount of money. Would we do the same scheme again if there was, heaven forfend, another pandemic? Probably not. We'd look to do something differently, but we need to learn from that. We need to have the ability to do it. So our proposition is, rather than borrow more to fund something, is to take the green levies, the carbon taxes off electricity bills and electricity generation, saving people 20%. That could happen overnight. And that would be.
But in fairness, James, I mean, that is the basis on which this £150 per year cut was made, that we have cut back specific levies that.
But not the carbon tax. Not getting rid of the carbon tax.
Some other ones we have.
So there's still 20% off an electricity bill that could come off. So I hope the Prime Minister will be look carefully at that rather than loading up on borrowing. That's something that could actually happen. Unfortunately, we've got in Ed Miliband someone who ideologically is focused on driving as rapidly as possible, never mind the cost, to change the energy system. We should be opening up new fields in the North Sea, and you'll have the opportunity this week, Tony, to vote to do that. I hope you'll do that rather than buy energy from other parts of the world. Why don't you want to support homegrown energy?
Well, we do want to support homegrown energy. It's very surprising.
Okay, let Tony respond, James.
So I think it's quite extraordinary that we have a Conservative Party wanting to talk about oil fields again. I mean, that's not going to solve this immediate problem.
Although, to be fair, Tony, you've got the leader of Unite, who's hardly a right-wing stooge, and you've got Gary from the GMB as well saying that Labour should allow exploration of North Sea oil.
We need to be going faster and further with our alternative non-carbon based energy generation schemes, whether it's nuclear, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's tidal. All of those things will mean that we're energy self-sufficient, and we can't keep going back to essentially a scheme which is based upon the global gas price, the global oil price.
So that's a no from Tony. Seamus, what are you hoping that the government can do in terms of easing this cost of living crisis? I know that John Swinney, the First Minister, had said that actually the government should have a meeting across the nations and regions, because this is obviously not just an England and Wales issue. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we've called for a 4-nation summit, and in fact, John Swinney's plea in that regard was mirrored by the First Minister of Northern Ireland as well. Because things are very different around the so-called United Kingdom. 60% of homes in Northern Ireland use home heating oil. In my constituency, in the very far northeast of Scotland, 14,000 homes use home heating oil. And I don't accept this argument that it's going to break the bank. Remember that there's 5% VAT on home heating oil. So there's bonanza here for the Treasury. So why aren't they using some of that money to offer not just a targeted help or package to people? Why not provide some universal help by dropping the 5% VAT temporarily on home heating oil? And don't forget, Aisha, that the 4.6 million which came to Scotland, which I described as a paltry sum, was immediately matched by more from the Scottish Government, 5.4 million. And we'll see that money targeted, of course, but we need universal help because so many people in rural Scotland are using home heating oil, and these are in isolated rural communities, and many of these folks are just about managing. They might not qualify if it's targeted on those.
But I suppose, Seamus, the argument will be that, and you know, it's kind of what Jeremy Hunt said today, and quite a few of our listeners have messaged in just saying, look, another, this is Paul messaging, saying another bailout will be ruinously expensive as at a time when we're paying £110 billion of interest per annum on our existing debt, and we can't actually afford to up our defence spending. What would you say to that?
It's all very well if you're sitting in the leafy suburbs in Surrey, but if you're in the far north of Scotland, believe you me, it's a lot different. The core here is that we're going to be spending, or paying, I should say, more than £700 on our energy bills, higher than what Labour promised when they came to power. £700 more than.
Although to be fair, Seamus, I mean, this Iran war was not, it's not their fault, to be fair. I mean, there's a lot of criticisms about the Labour government, but this war is not their fault.
It may not be their fault, but I would have liked to have seen the UK government take a stronger stance against Netanyahu and Trump much earlier, before this war actually began. Because if they had, we might be sitting in a very different place, Aisha.
Okay. Noah, I mean, this is a huge political and economic headache for Rachel Reeves. It feels like the Spring Statement was like a long, long time ago. What do you think is available to the government realistically in terms of helping people out? Because people are going to be worried sick about the economic consequences, and energy is at the heart of people's homes and their personal finances and the wider economy as well. It's going to have huge ramifications for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I had to rush to lock in a mortgage rate while I was in the middle of a lunch meeting after getting an email that they were going to go up from my bank in just 24 hours. And I was genuinely devastated because I was really expecting an interest rate cut and therefore a pay rise. So it's touching absolutely everyone. In terms of energy bills, if there is any support, it has to be targeted. We just do not have the resources for a universal bailout. And I don't, people who are comfortable, who are well off, do not need public money to help with their energy bills. So if it does come to that, it will have to be nothing like the £40 billion pound support package we saw under Liz Truss. It will have to be very much targeted at the most vulnerable households. But I think, again, as Tony said, it's such a fast-moving situation that it's so difficult to come up with some sort of definitive position on what help is necessary and when. And I do think it will take time to see where this is going. And it's not made easier by the fact that Trump changes his position on the war seemingly on the hour. And, these decisions that he's making are having a huge impact on every household in the country. But I will just add that if Ed Miliband, for any reason, is putting ideological purity above helping households with the cost of living crisis, I think that's quite unforgivable.
And what do you mean by that? Do you mean that in terms of North Sea drilling?
Yeah, and green levies on bills. And I appreciate the £150 discount, but that's just moving on to general taxation. So it's not actually really getting rid of that green levy. It's just changing where the pot that it's coming from. So if it does get to the point where we are in an absolute crisis and there does need to be some sort of help, and there is an option available that is less consequential for the public purse, and Ed Miliband says no because of ideological purity, I think the public will not stand for that at all. I think a lot of people will be very angry. Maybe not the Green Party, but a lot of others.
Oh, I think the Green Party will still be angry with Ed Miliband. Do not worry about that. I think the Green Party will still be angry with Labour. Right, let's recover.
Ed is interested in the long-term interest of the country. I mean, the thing is, if we just go back to exploring more oil and gas, then we're just going to make it harder to be energy independent on the basis of clean power. It's about not being reliant on the global gas prices, global oil and gas markets. And that is ultimately what is going to make us energy independent and actually put bills down in the long term.
Although, Tony, there is a counter view. We had like a long debate about this in our show last week, and we spoke to a number of experts, including Ed Conway from Sky, and he was absolutely saying that there should be a huge amount invested in renewables. So he absolutely was very supportive of that. But there was also an argument that, if oil and gas companies are prepared to do some more exploration and there is some oil and gas there, why shouldn't that be allowed? Because the gas can be used, and yes, you're right that the oil, it's not a quick fix, and the oil doesn't come directly to Britain, but some of the tax revenue could be used to fund renewables. So, I mean, there are people that do have that argument, and that's one of Sharon Graham's argument. Others just saying if there is oil and gas to be explored, and companies are willing to take the risk, their own financial risk, and do that, why not let them, Tony?
It's just not going to solve the problem that we immediately have in terms of being at the mercy of the global oil and gas markets. I mean, that is what we have to get away from.
But surely the tax revenue could help, because there's a big windfall.
All the price shocks that we've had on energy basis is all because of our reliance on the global oil and gas market.
I must say, Aisha, I'd like to come in on this because I actually agree with Noah. We should be doing both here. We're running down the oil and gas sector far too quickly. Both the OE UK and the North Sea Transition Authority tell us that there's plenty of oil and gas left out there, and we should be taking it because, for this very simple reason, Tony, it's much more carbon friendly to take it from the North Sea than it is to import it from further afield.
But if it's not going to make any difference to energy bills...
The Norwegians are exploring basins next to where we could be exploring. It's absolutely crackers to have an ideological bent against the jobs in the North Sea.
It's not ideological, it's about what...
Well, it is. Well, why are you doing that? It's not coherent.
It's not going to make a difference to energy bills. And it's
OK, all right. We have to draw to... The final thing I'm just going to say, and this is Chair's prerogative, just look... Tony, I hear your point about it's not going to help now, but just remember Nick Clegg 20 years ago said there's no point investing in nuclear because it's not going to help now. And 20 years later, my God, we all wish we had invested. Wish we had invested in a bit of nuclear. But you're right. It's none of the reality is with energy. None of this is a quick fix to solve bills overnight, but it has to be a lot of, in my view, investment in a lot of different things. The other thing, just before I go to the news, cheers, bro, I think we've got to look to break the link in terms of gas prices and electricity prices and renewables. And I think that is another thing which is holding back our energy market. Right, we're a bit late to the news, but do not worry. I'll get through lots of messages coming through about the energy mix. Next up, we're going to move on to immigration. It's just gone 5:35. You're listening to Aisha Hazarika on Times Radio. Let's now catch up with Howard Bentham for all the latest news.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thank you. Good evening. Iran is insisting a key oil shipping route is open to all ships, except vessels with links to its enemies. Donald Trump has given Tehran a 48-hour ultimatum to fully open the Strait of Hormuz or it'll obliterate Iran's power plants. Tehran has threatened to retaliate. Meanwhile, motorists here are being urged not to panic buy at the pumps, with the government insisting there are no plans to limit fuel sales. For the second time this season, a Premier League match has been stopped because of racist abuse. Play was paused during the Tyne Wear derby at Newcastle when Sunderland defender Lucharel Gertrude had to report comments to the referee. The visitors went on to win the match 2-1. The number of meningitis cases in Kent has fallen to 29. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has thanked those who've helped with the outbreak. And the first female Archbishop of Canterbury has completed her 6-day walking pilgrimage ahead of her enthronement on Wednesday. Dame Sarah Mullally told onlookers she was very relieved after reaching the city from London. And don't forget, you can set the Times Radio News Briefing as your news service on Alexa.
This is Times Radio.
I thought I'd seen it all, then felt myself awaken. I thought I'd witnessed beauty before my breath was taken. I thought that I'd known wonder, then sailed beneath these skies. I thought I'd seen the world until I opened my eyes. Change the way you see the world with HX Expeditions. Search Travel HX to discover more.
Wake up to a brighter breakfast. Times Radio Breakfast. 7 days a week from 6 a.m.
Aisha Hazarika on Times Radio with Lloyds. Our experts make sure your remortgaging experience is fast, simple and stress-free. To find out more, search Mortgages on Lloyds. Lending subject to status. You could lose your home if you don't keep up your mortgage repayments.
Welcome back to our Sunday political panel. We've got a great lineup for you. Tony Vaughan from the Labour Party, James Wild from the Conservatives, Seamus Logan from the SNP and Noah Hoffman from The Sun. And you at home as well, loads of messages coming in just about that chat about energy. I'll read a couple out. Mike says, given the rise in petrol prices and the duty and taxes on it, the government must be raking it in plenty of money to give relief to everyone towards their energy bills. Well, I think there's lots of demands on the Exchequer. I think the MOD right now is gasping for money. Another Mike, lots of Mikes messaging in, say, I think it would be reckless for the Chancellor to provide a blanket government bailout to every household. It was wrong back in 2022, and it'd be even more wrong now given the current state of public finances. This is a G7 country. It cannot be impossible for our Treasury to find a mechanism to target help to only the most vulnerable of people. Helen says one reason our energy costs are so high are the levies for green energy. Whilst I'm totally supportive of green energy, why not take more oil and gas from the North Sea and use those taxes to pay for the green levy, therefore reducing our energy while we build more resilience for the future. Josh says, poor Ed Miliband, he's been criticised by at least two of the panel. Ed is a good egg. No one is besmirching Ed's good I was going to say Ed's good character. Just his policies. David says, I wish politicians would stop conflating electricity and energy. We should be investing in renewals, but millions of homes have gas boilers and petrol cars which cannot be electrified overnight or even in the next 5 years. And Handyman says, the people against more drilling always hide behind the international market. Just take North Sea oil out of the international market and supply only to Great Britain. I don't think it is quite as easy as that. But lots of people saying you can sell the oil and you could use the tax revenue. And someone makes the point, we need to consider actually how much of the North Sea oil we can actually refine in the UK. We've reduced refineries since the heyday, and we must now export our oil to foreign refineries at a global oil price. And we then import refined product back, Anna. So that is a very, very good point. Right, let's move on to another important topic, and that is immigration. We know that immigration is a big issue for the public. It has been for quite some time. I myself, when I was door knocking recently in Scotland, it was cost of living first. Very, very big worries about the cost of living, and immigration second. It is definitely an issue. Shabana Mahmood put forward proposals, but there's been quite a lot of pushback from her own side and her own party, particularly on some of her ideas to double the length of time that it would take for migrants to gain indefinite leave to remain or to get permanent residency, and there's quite a lot of pushback from this. So very keen to just hear what the panel's thoughts are on the Home Secretary's plans for immigration. Tony, I'm going to start with you because you wrote a very powerful letter to the Home Secretary. It was signed by over 100 Labour MPs expressing concerns. Tell me what you and your colleagues are worried about, and do you think there will be quite a lot of pushback from others?
Look, the Home Office and the Home Secretary have a huge challenge in bringing back public confidence to the immigration and asylum system. I mean, this earned settlement proposal is not, though, about immigration. It's about, for those who have been here and lived here for several years, currently the benchmark is 5 years, that you have to have lived and worked and paid your taxes. Do you get a settlement, which is a right to stay permanently at that point, or do you get it much later? And these proposals are essentially saying that, you know, for the child of a banker, they could get settlement in 3 years, and the child of a care worker, and I'm the son of a care worker, they would get settlement in 15 years. And it's this kind of large disparity between the different kinds of worker that really doesn't sound right to me, and ultimately it's based on a estimate as to money that would be saved. That actually won't be a saving. It's based on a number which I think a number of people who came between 2021 and 2024. It's a suggestion that they would be a drain on the welfare bill, but actually, when one looks carefully at the Home Office's evidence, that isn't actually the case. It will just delay the point at which that happens, and ultimately we will lose the migrant workers in the meantime. It'd be very difficult to fill skills needs across the country. And
look, Tony, given that obviously the government is having a difficult time at the moment. Obviously, there's the whole Iran war and the economic consequences. But even before that, the government was having a difficult time under pressure from obviously the left of politics, but also the right of politics. And there is a lot of concern about immigration. If you and your colleagues force a U-turn on this, is there a danger that this is adding further damage to the reputation of the Prime Minister in terms of not being able to get his wishes through, and that he's, you know, always bowing to backbench MPs? Are you worried about how that looks for him?
I mean, first of all, this is a consultation that the Home Office has invited submissions on. I think they've got 200,000 responses. And so this is not a cast iron set of proposals. It is a consultation. And so the government, as with all consultations, they may implement some of what's proposed and they may not implement other parts. And that's entirely normal. And what I would like is that more changes were made compared to the original proposals. But all of that remains to be worked out, and conversations are ongoing about that all of the time. And I think that even if changes were made, and there were some indications this week that some changes to the original proposals may well be made, that's the government listening. That shouldn't be a weakness, seen as a weakness, if that were to eventuate.
James, if there is a sort of backing down on this by the government, what will you make of that?
Well, I think it would be disappointing. I don't think it tallies with what the public opinion and people want to see. And we've seen, obviously, Angela Rayner's been out talking about this as one of the issues that she would want to see reversed. We think that broadly, Shabana Mahmood's got the right instincts here. We'd like her to go further in some places, and we'll see what the government brings forward after the consultation. But Kemi Badenoch has made an offer to the Prime Minister to use Conservatives to help secure the immigration reforms, which I think the vast majority of the public support and want to see a tightening, because this is not about, these aren't rights, this is about a privilege, and people need to earn that privilege and come and make a contribution to the country. I think that's a common sense position. And
you said that the Conservatives are supporting the Home Secretary. I mean, would you say that she's done a good job? Because net legal migration is falling quite heavily now. I mean, at some point, people are saying it might even get down to net zero on this. That's something that obviously the Conservatives didn't do. The figures shot up under the Conservatives. So would you concede she's doing a good job on immigration?
Well, no, let's be clear. The decline we're seeing in net legal migration is due to the measures that were put in place by James Cleverly and other Home Secretaries, which are now biting, whether that's salary thresholds or others. The area where the Home Secretary is utterly failing is to do anything to deal with the small boat crisis. And that's because she scrapped the deterrent that was in place, and we've seen more people come, and she signed a deal with France, one in, one out, which has sadly been completely woeful.
You removed a couple of people that cost several £1 million. I mean, I'm not
There's
sure.
No deterrent, Tony. You said you want to see that. How's the French deal going? How many people have been removed?
Well, you need a measure like that.
How many?
We need to do more of those, but it's a pilot scheme. And
We've been in for 2 years.
The Rwanda scheme was a complete utter failure. It doesn't really line the Tories
The scheme hadn't started. They can't say it failed.
Okay.
He scrapped it.
Let's hear from Seamus. Seamus, what do you think about this? Do you think Tony is right to persuade the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to change their mind on this?
Yeah, I have some sympathy with the 100-odd MPs that I understand may have signed Tony's letter. Some of the Tories must think that they've died and gone to heaven when they see somebody like Shabana Mahmood as the Home Secretary, because as far as I can see, this is just the latest in a line of ill-thought-out changes that are designed to outflank the right, and specifically the Reform Party. I mean, the idea here is that they move away from if you like, a time-served model to an earned settlement model. And once again, we see how things look so much different in Scotland. Because I can tell you, Aisha, we have a lot of sheep in the fields here that need sheared.
Oh, well, hang on, Seamus. No. I was out door knocking in Lanarkshire, and I was surprised immigration came up a lot.
No, I'm not saying that it's not a concern. What I'm saying is that the situation is very different in different parts of the country. We need workers, both in the fishing industry, in the farming industry, in hospitality, in the care sector, in the NHS. And these proposals, and the latest in a long line of proposals from the Home Secretary, will make it even harder for us to be able to fill those vacancies. That's why things need to change. And I'm so sorry to say that despite the 100 MPs who are trying to oppose these changes, I don't see any chance of the Home Secretary backing down, because the real problem here is the Reform Party and the threat that they pose to not only the Labour Party, but to the Conservatives as well.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting that Seamus at the end said this is a threat from Reform, but Labour's losing a lot of votes to the Greens right now. We just had that Gorton and Denton by-election, Noah, and you've got, Angela Rayner spoke out this week again, sort of backing what kind of Tony was saying as well. What do you think the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister will end up doing on this?
I will be very surprised if there is not a U-turn on this, because Tony, and I mean, congratulations on this. Keir Starmer is a total hostage to you in the PLP, so which is great for you guys. But it means that in terms of measures such as immigration, the polling shows the public support what Shabana Mahmood is doing. The PLP is out of touch with the public on
I don't
this.
think that's right. I mean, there was some Ipsos polling that suggested that the public was broadly in a completely different place to
poll after poll showed that the public support across, particularly in Labour, and there's even some polls showing among Green voters as well. The public want a crackdown on immigration. They do. I'm sorry, they do. But I think nonetheless,
what they're being asked about.
I think the polling shows, and I don't know where you're door knocking, but across constituencies, the public wants something to be done about net migration. But I think that you will win, Tony, because you have Keir Starmer completely in a bind in that the PLP is just way more powerful than the Prime Minister is.
Do you feel... hang on. Do you feel very powerful, Tony?
No. I mean that characterization is completely wrong. I mean
how many U-turns has Keir Starmer made?
There's 400 or so at Labour
like
MPs.
70.
There's 100 people that signed that, and that's part of the reason for trying to raise the profile on the issue, because there are a smaller number of MPs who are actually concerned about this. But look, the reality is that if we pretend that this is something that the public wants, then we're gonna. But
it's not pretending.
It's
not pretending.
Okay, look, at most, the polls are contradictory about whether the public support this, but one has to distinguish between immigration and earned settlement, because, of course, 900,000 net migration, which we were left with by the Tories, is too high, and the government has brought that down. But the question is...
measures we introduced nothing to do with the government.
But when the question of who belongs is asked, so how long do you have to work here to actually get a settlement, if we make that too strict, we're going to find exactly in areas like Seamus's or areas like mine or sectors like care, that's one of the largest growth areas in my constituency, we're just not going to have the work.
Okay. I'm going to do... Order. I'm doing my John Bercow impression now. We are going to call time on that discussion now, because I do want to fit in our last topic. I'll just read a couple of messages. Chris has just messaged in saying, why should asylum seekers or even refugees not return to their own countries if conditions should become safe for them to do so? Extending the period before indefinite right to remain is granted gives more leeway to investigate their safety to return. There is also a deterrent aspect to this. Right, we've got plenty more to come from our very excellent panellists. Very, very good spirited discussion today. Coming up next, we are going to discuss those Eid prayers, those iftar prayers in Trafalgar Square. Lots of politicians are weighing in on that. I want to hear what my panel think about that next, but it's just gone 5:51. You're listening to Aisha Hazarika on Times Radio in association with the Sunday Times Best Places to Live 2026, sponsored by Lloyds.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with ServiceNow. All the latest national and international breaking news and informative interviews. Plus, hear unrivaled journalistic expertise and detailed analysis on the radio programme where sharp insight meets original thinking. John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive. Tomorrow afternoon from 4 on Times Radio with ServiceNow. The AI control tower for business reinvention. Find out more at servicenow.com.
Listen to Times Radio on your smart speaker. Just say, play Times Radio.
Feel that? That little buzz of excitement? That's the weekly flutter. With chances to win up to £10,000, enter British Heart Foundation's lottery for a thrill with goodwill behind it. Because when you play, it helps fund life-saving research. So go on, keep playing, keep winning, keep us beating. Search BHF Lottery. Gamble responsibly. Over 18s only. T's and C's apply. Please see our website for more details. British Heart Foundation is a registered charity.
Times Radio with Aisha Hazarika.
Welcome back to our Sunday political panel. We've got Tony Vaughan from the Labour Party, James Wilde from the Conservatives, Seamus Logan from the SNP and Noah Hoffman from The Sun. We've got about 7 minutes left, and I did want to get my panellists' thoughts on a row that came about after a large public Ramadan event last Monday, where Muslims, including the London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan, prayed at Trafalgar Square, and it has caused a big political row. Nick Timothy, the Conservative Shadow Justice Secretary, labelled the event an act of domination and division. The Prime Minister said that was absolutely appalling and that Timothy should be sacked. And Robert Jenrick and Reform has also condemned the event. James Wilde, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think we should be banning Muslims from doing public prayer?
Well, I think, first of all, we all believe in freedom of religion. I think the point that Nick was raising, and he set out in detail the case that he was actually making as well, and anyone interested can go and read that. It was about how religion's expressed in the shared public spaces that we have and whether that fits within the norms of British culture. And I think
so why is it okay to have like Hanukkah events and Diwali events and Easter events in a public space but not a Muslim event?
Well, I think there's issues to do with the segregation that happened at this event, with women forced to the back of the event. That
but in Nick Timothy's words, he didn't say anything about segregation. He didn't say anything about women. He talked about acts of domination and division.
Well, as I say, he set out in detail his thoughts on this and explained the rationale around some of the Islamist political ideology that was what he was also referring to.
So do you think Sadiq Khan's an Islamist? He sort of led it?
No,
he's quite an integrated Muslim.
I think this slightly demonstrates what people can disagree with Nick, they can agree with him. But what we've tried to see, I think, in the last day and with some of the interviews this morning by cabinet ministers, is trying to shut down a debate. And that's why one of the issues that Nick's also raised is around the Islamophobia definition, how that could be used to try and curtail legitimate debate.
But we're having lots of debates we're having lots of debate. I mean, I don't think Nick Timothy should be sacked for this. I suspect he might be off to reform, but I don't think, we don't not talk about Muslims, and we talk about it quite a lot. I suppose the point I'm just trying to ask, as you, as an MP, because I think, just be honest about it, are you saying then that the Conservative view is Muslims are adjacent to Islamism and that all of that should be cut back on?
No, you're saying absolutely the opposite of that. But there is, and we can't, if we deny it, that we're going to cause ourselves problems. There is a Islamist stream, and we've seen that's been behind terrorist attacks in our own country and around the world, and we need to confront that and call it out. Okay. This is where the debate is. People try and conflate Islam and Islamists in a way to try and stop debate about different things that are happening in the country. And I think Nick's been brave to stand out and make that call, and it's disappointing to see other MPs try to get him silenced and call for investigations to try and silence him. He's not going to silence. He's certainly not going to reform.
Seamus, your thoughts on this briefly, if you will.
Well, I'm sorry to say I completely disagree with James here, and I'm going to disappoint him greatly, because I believe Nick Timothy should not only be sacked as a shadow minister, there should be some mechanism whereby he can be reported to a standards commissioner in Parliament. Now, just let me finish, because I didn't hear him complaining about a Palm Sunday event in Trafalgar Square, or a Hanukkah event, or Diwali. I didn't hear him complain when Rishi Sunak lit candles outside 10 Downing Street for Diwali. This is simply racism dressed up as something else. It shows great or gross intolerance by Nick Timothy. And once again, it's all about trying to seize the ground currently occupied by more extreme right-wing parties.
Okay.
I think accusing someone of being a racist is a serious claim to make.
Okay. Tony.
Well, a lot of that I agree with. I mean, the clue is in the title. This was an open iftar event, and there were prayers in a public space, in the same way that, as Seamus said, Sikhs have, Christians have, and I think this idea that this was, there's anything wrong with this whatsoever, I just find deeply baffling and completely disagree with Nick Timothy on this. Do
you think he should be sacked, though, Tony? I mean, he's obviously got a view which many people disagree with, but does that mean he should be sacked? People are allowed to have different opinions.
Well, they're allowed to have different opinions, but if it's kind of a grossly discriminatory opinion towards a group of people for which there is no actual reason, justification for doing it, then that is sackable. That isn't the standard that we need to be teaching the British public as being okay in the 21st century. And I just don't know why Nick Timothy thinks he should be doing this, unless he's kind of rolling the pitch for defecting to reform.
Noah, what are your thoughts on this? And do you think Nick Timothy might be on the move to reform?
I don't think Nick Timothy is on the move to reform. Personally, I didn't see anything wrong with that event. And I think you have to be consistent. If it's okay to have a big Hanukkah event, if it's okay to have a big Diwali event, of course it has to be okay to have a big iftar event. So I don't think that was an example of domination personally. But what I do think is that the wider point about Islamist forms of domination is accurate, just not at that event. All you need to do is look at the insane Al-Quds hate festival. All you need to do is look at the West Midlands police being bullied into submission by local Islamists in Birmingham. There are loads of examples. A lot of people on the Palestine marches, not all of them by any means, but quite a few people with certain slogans and certain placards. That is an example of Islamist domination, but we have to be so careful to be very clear about the distinction between political Islamism and Islamists and just ordinary Muslims. And I